Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me. With me, I have several colleagues whom you'll meet in the coming minutes, and we've worked so hard over the course of the semester to develop this recommendation for you, diving into research and analysis to come up with which of these two companies, Air France and Lufthansa, have the superior sustainability plan. We're at an inflection point in human history. There are two paths ahead of us. One of complacency, where we continue to allow the globe to warm, we continue to pollute the earth, and are just fine with it. The 2020 has seen a record number of fires raging across California or hurricanes slamming into the coast. Is that the path we want to take? I don't think so. I think the ulterior option, the one in which we take action and we strive to undo these problems that have been caused, where we work to create a better future for everyone, that's the path I want to take. And with your help, we can get there. Your investment, your capital into one of these firms will help make a difference and solve one of the greatest crises facing our humankind, really. Not just a nation, not just a continent, but the entire globe is affected by this. As you know, airlines are responsible for over 2% of total carbon dioxide emissions each year. That's unacceptable. And there have been some ambitious targets set to reduce emissions by 50% by 2050. And in order to get there, we're going to need your help, and we're going to need some top-notch sustainability practices. So this presentation will dive in to each of those. We've identified 3 different sustainability practices, which we'll explore in depth for each company, and then use an analysis-based metric to compare them. We've developed a framework, a visual matrix, to assess each of these companies on their performance in the 3 practices, which are carbon offsetting, more efficient aircrafts, and sustainable aviation fuel. Finally, we'll use all of these factors and establish our final recommendation for you as impact investors to put your money towards to work to make this world a better place, to end global warming, and to reduce total pollutions by the airline industry. With that, I'll pass it over to my colleague Danielle, who'll be exploring the first of these sustainability practices, carbon offsetting. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, David. Our first sustainability practice is carbon offsetting. Carbon offsetting is the process of compensating for CO2 emissions through programs that make equivalent CO2 reductions in the atmosphere. This is done through actions such as investing in renewable energy or planting trees, which can alone absorb 48 pounds of CO2 per year, according to Keystone. This is one of the primary ways through which the airline industry is working to reduce their carbon footprint. In an effort to reduce their carbon emissions, Lufthansa has employed carbon offsetting in several ways. In their sustainability fact sheet, the airline pledges that all CO2 emissions from their employees' business travel are offset. Additionally, in 2019, the Lufthansa Innovation Hub launched the Compensate platform. Business Traveler explains that this allows travelers from any airline, not just Lufthansa, to track their individual carbon footprint from air travel. This platform also gives users an opportunity to donate to offsetting projects or purchase sustainable aviation fuel for Lufthansa to use on future flights. This initiative has a low cost to Lufthansa directly as a result of the cost burden falling on individual travelers. According to Lufthansa's sustainability fact sheet, in 2019, over 151,000 tons of CO2 were directly offset by the Lufthansa Group through these efforts. Air France also participates in carbon offsetting. In a press release, Air France explains that as of January 2020, they were the first airline to proactively offset 100% of CO2 emissions from their domestic flights. This results in completely offset emissions for 450 flights and 57,000 customers each day. The airline offsets these emissions through 6 different projects that they selected in partnership with the organization EcoAct. According to an article by phys.org, the burden of this program is a cost of several million euros, which falls on Air France entirely. Now I'm going to pass it off to Kelly to talk about fuel-efficient aircrafts.
Thank you so much, Danielle. In addition to offsetting carbon emissions, airlines can develop other sustainability practices that help them achieve their quantified goals to become more environmentally conscious. One major way to do this is by adopting and investing in fuel efficient aircrafts, whether it be by devising more fuel conscious flight paths, helping to develop and funding the creation of new, more fuel efficient aircrafts, or simply by implementing these models into an airline's fleet. There are multiple ways for airlines to instill this practice within their operations and their future. There have also been developments of a hybrid and fully electronic aircrafts, first seen by the creation of Airbus in 2017, according to their website. From then on, the possibilities to improve airline fuel efficiency has increased and continues to increase exponentially. We then specifically examined the fuel efficiency practices used by Lufthansa and Air France. According to the Lufthansa Group, they most recently acquired 27 new aircrafts for their fleet that result in up to a 25% reduction on CO2 emissions when compared to their existing models. In addition to this, they will also start to phase out 7 of their existing aircrafts in order for them to be replaced by more fuel efficient models. They are also always looking for ways to invest in new technologies that will advance the ability for aircrafts to be fuel efficient beyond its existing capabilities, with their more recent focus being their billion euro investments in a state of the art low emissions fleet. It is through these quantified efforts that we can see Lufthansa making strides towards sustainability via fuel efficiency. Air France has similar operations in place to advance their fuel efficiencies. In addition to already being amongst the top 6 airlines in terms of average fuel efficiency, according to the ICCT, they recently added 5 new aircrafts to their fleet that are their most fuel efficient and least noisy models yet. They only plan to improve these models going forward. It is also listed within their sustainable development agenda on their website that their plan to reduce CO2 emissions by 50% in 2030 firstly starts with investment in fuel efficient aircrafts. Air France also spearheads the fuel efficiency conversation within the industry by partnering with organizations such as the Solar Impulse Foundation and hosting events such as the Roundtable on Sustainable Biomaterials, to name a few. So, while Air France has less quantifiable progress within the field of fuel efficiency, they are working hard to make the issue more pressing within the airline industry, which is important for our environment as a whole. I'll now pass it over to Raj to discuss sustainable fuels.
Thanks, Kelly. Sustainable aviation fuel, also known as SAF, is the diversification of fuels used by airlines by incorporating sustainable fuels produced from plants, algae, and waste products. Studies show that sustainable fuels could reduce the overall carbon emissions per kilogram burned of the fuel by over 50%. Regarding Lufthansa's approach to sustainable aviation fuel, they signed a declaration of support for the PTX initiative in August of 2019, where the goal was to produce industrial standard sustainable fuels from renewable energy sources. They also signed a letter of intent with Hyde Refinery, where they pledged to support electricity based kerosene. When kerosene is burned, only as much CO2 is released as was previously removed from the atmosphere during production. They are also involved with Power Fuel Initiative. This is all about supporting the development and market for synthetic renewable energy sources. Finally, in 2011, they pioneered the world's first long-term testing of biokerosene in regular flight operations. This is one of the most important aspects of this special fuel is that it requires no infrastructure adaptation. On the other hand, in terms of Air France's approach to sustainable aviation fuel, they use SAF that went through internal processes to confirm it is feedstock sustainable. They also signed the Engagement for Green Growth in 2017 that encourages France to implement more SAF production sites to make supplying the fuel more sustainable and reachable as well. In 2019, they made a decade-long commitment to purchasing 75,000 tons of SAF annually. They're the first airline to do this at this scale. In 2019, they also signed a memorandum with Shell committing to using a blend of conventional and sustainable fuel for aviation for flights departing from San Francisco. This wasn't implemented until this year in 2020, however, because of COVID. This will avoid roughly 6,000 tons of CO2 emissions over 16 months. Finally, they founded Sky Energy, which is the world's largest supplier of SAF. They are working with them to implement Europe's first SAF production site by 2023. Now I will pass it to Manav to talk about the comparison matrix.
Thank you, Raj. Our team created this comparison matrix to better help you investors to understand where we reside on each of Air France's and Lufthansa's sustainability practices. Ranking each from 1 to 10 with regards to cost and total effectiveness, we can then decide which company is more worthwhile for your investment. In terms of carbon offsetting, Lufthansa's strategy is low cost to them because it shifts the costs to the customers. This could be consequential because some customers might not want to pay the extra fees. However, this platform is available to all travelers, regardless of airline, and focuses on both domestic and international flights. Lufthansa receives an 8 from our team. Air France, on the other hand, offsets 100% of domestic emissions but costs them millions of dollars. Additionally, Air France only focuses on domestic flights rather than both domestic and international. This reasoning leads us to rate Lufthansa higher in terms of each company's use of carbon offsetting to make up for carbon emissions. They receive a 6 from us. In terms of fuel efficient aircrafts, Lufthansa made their focus quantifiable and has already began to implement countless new fuel efficient aircrafts within their fleet in addition to helping more development of fuel usage methods. They've shown initiative by investing in technological developments in aircraft fuel efficiency. However, they are one of the industry's highest among average fuel consumption per year, so they have more work to do than most airlines. Our rating is an 8 out of 10. Air France, on the other hand, has implemented some fuel efficient models to their fleet, but not very many. Although they are participating within research and development of these models, they are not doing enough to address their problems right now. Contrarily, they are in constant talks to reduce fuel consumption and already have a low average fuel consumption cost compared to other airlines. We rate this a 7. Looking at the sustainable aviation fuels last, aside from testing of biokerosene, there really has not been real action from Lufthansa in terms of sustainable aviation fuels. They have signed declarations and pledges, but there isn't much action to be seen yet. Looking at the costs, the implementation of biokerosene fuel will not cost the company anything in terms of aircraft infrastructure. However, the fuel will likely be more costly, and this receives a rating of 6 from us. Air France has followed through on commitments to purchasing sustainable aviation fuels, but again, a lot of commitments and pledges instead of actual implementation. They have, however, increased spending for sustainable aviation fuels, and that allows them to have a higher ranking of 7 than Lufthansa in this case. Looking at the totals, we see that Lufthansa has an overall total of 22 from us and Air France 20. Going forward, this leads us to believe that the best overall choice for investing in future aircraft travel is going to be Lufthansa for those reasons that we listed earlier. Now, I'll pass it on to David to conclude our presentation.
Thank you for that thoughtful and in-depth analysis, Manav. So there you have it, folks. Our recommendation for Lufthansa as the superior airline as far as sustainability is concerned. Together, we can take off towards a better future. The airline industry is a magical thing, connecting us, allowing us to travel, to see loved ones, to do work, to be productive. But it does have its side effects, some harmful consequences for the environment, but it doesn't have to. With your investment in Lufthansa, we can make a cleaner future with all the benefits of air travel, but not too many of the side effects. That's a world that I want to live in. Thank you for being here with us today. We'll stick around for questions if you have any, but we really appreciate it. Let's fly on.